Welcome back to From the Burbs to the Tetons, where we talk about our journey of moving from the suburbs of Washington, D.C. to the Teton Valley in Idaho. So the last video we talked about how you figure out where you want to retire to. And it was kind of a generic talk about, you know, the different steps you can take. So I thought it might be nice if I discuss some of the things that I went through on our journey on finding where we decided, you know, finally decided where we were going to go ahead and retire. Originally, we were going to go ahead and retire to Bath, New York. And the way we found we were going to retire to Bath, New York is we have family property there on my mom's side. And that was going to be left to me in my uncle's will. And this all happened about when I was about 40-ish, so about 15 years ago. And I really didn't think a lot of it at the time besides, hey, I've always loved the area. My wife and I have gone up several times to visit my uncle there, and it's a nice little place, and we would own it outright. Seemed like a reasonable plan. 10 years go by, the kids are now in college, we're empty nesters, starting to think more and more about the future on what we want to do for ourselves, because, you know, almost all of us go through it with the kids where we make a lot of sacrifices for our kids and put them first. So finally, you know, my wife and I were talking, I said, you know, it's time for us to put ourselves first now. And, you know, Bath, New York seemed fine. We were okay with that. My only concern was how much there was to do during the winter. So I thought, snowbirding, let's do a little research on that. And I started researching places to snowbird with golfing involved. Now, I'm gonna end up, unfortunately, kind of like stopping halfway through stuff, because as this research unfolds, it just spans out into a huge tree of information. And that's what the channel is about, all that information that I dug up. So if as I'm going through this and talking about it, you feel like, boy, I wish you would have covered that more, comment down in the comment section. Because I really want to know what things interest you the most. So I'll concentrate on those first as I'm going through this story of us getting out there. So I started looking at snowbird places, especially where there was a lot of golfing. And then one of the things that happened is I thought, well, maybe I just look for golf communities, see what's out there. And I was primarily focusing in, like, you know, South Carolina, Georgia, you know, North Carolina, the south part of North Carolina, someplace where it would be a reasonable temperature in the winter. Yeah, there'd be cold days and I wouldn't be able to golf, or we wouldn't want to go outside, but most of the time you could put on a sweater and go golfing. So that was my thought process. And then I started looking at best golf communities to retire at. And through that research, I stumbled into best states to retire in. And that was interesting because I was kind of shocked that many of the states in the Northwest, you know, United States were on the list. But I will cover more of that later. But the thing that struck me was like, okay, well, what are the 10 worst? Because everybody says, New York, oh, it's a horrible place to retire. I went and I looked, and lo and behold, 48th from the same, I think it was U.S. World Report. I could be wrong. Again, it was long before I was even thinking about a YouTube channel. And this year, 2018, New York was rated 50th in most of the studies I looked at. Those are studies I looked at for the previous video. Yeah, it was just shocking. And my uncle, who always likes to exaggerate about how bad something is when it's really not that bad, kept saying how bad the taxes were in New York. And I finally asked him, hey, can you tell me how much you're really paying? Well, he was paying about $6,000 a year in taxes. Now, that may not be a lot if your property is worth $1.5 million. The property, which I did inherit it a couple years ago, I did sell it, was only worth about $65,000. So that's a 10% tax, meaning over 10 years I rebuy the property each time in taxes. Here in Fairfax County, where I live now, the taxes are about 3% or something like that, and it's considered high. And it's considered high because we have a really good school system in the county, and a lot of the money goes to that. So I was willing to do that for my kids, and I didn't think anything of it. But 10%? I'm just thinking, what the heck are they doing up there in New York State? So, you know, that's kind of where we sat, and talking over with my wife, we pretty much decided we weren't going to go ahead and retire to New York State. So once that decision was made, we started thinking about, well, where would we want to live? And I think I mentioned this in the previous video. We're both mountain people, and normally you're going to look at people who want to retire in place or at least near where they're at, right? You know, hey, we bought a little cabin out in the woods 45 minutes outside of the city, or actually live in the city. Beach, I guess I didn't mention this in the last video, lake or mountains. And often mountain and lakes go together, so that's why I didn't last time mention it. But we were definitely mountain people. It wasn't even a long discussion. And the first thing you think about when you think about mountains in the U.S. is Colorado. I started taking a quick look at Colorado, quickly decided that that wasn't for us. Denver has really grown. It's a huge metropolitan area, and that's one of the things we're trying to get away from. We want to be rural. We want to be small town. I grew up on bases that are basically their own small little community. My wife, she grew up in Las Vegas long before it got as big as it is now, and that was kind of like a small city. So we're both ready to get back to that kind of lifestyle of being in a small community. Once Colorado was taken off the list, I started moving north, and eventually started looking at Wyoming, Montana, Oregon, Idaho. And I talked to my wife about all the trips we took out to visit my uncle in Teton National Park, and we just loved it. I mean, it was something we really, really enjoyed and looked forward to every time we went out there. And I started doing some more research in that area of the country. You've got a lot of nice areas to retire out there. Matter of fact, Idaho is one of the fastest growing states as far as population go, with a lot of people migrating from California to Idaho. And one of the things that I kind of got drawn to is the Teton mountain range. Every mountain you've got, either the east and the west side, or the north and the south side of the mountain to look at on these mountain ranges. The east side is Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Very, very, very expensive to move there. The other side is Teton Valley, Idaho. They had 3 really small towns there, and matter of fact, they were so small I was worried about whether or not it might be too small. But we went ahead and I started doing a lot of research. And so the first thing that I really kind of started researching were the cost of property. If you can't move there, if you can't afford to move there, then the rest of it doesn't matter. So that was the first thing I looked at, and I looked at it a lot. I looked for almost 18 months at focusing on that. And then while I was doing that, I started looking at some of the other things, just things that came to the top of my head. Like when we'd been out there before, the bugs were a real problem in the forests. But so I went on to a angler site that talked about all the fishing in the area, and they said, hey, the bugs just aren't a problem. while we were out there, I found out that they spray, 10 to 12 times a year as an abatement to the bugs, because they realize with that many bugs, nobody wants to be outside, kills the tourist industry out there. So, those are the kind of things I kind of spent, 65 to 75% of my time on looking at land, looking at houses to see what the cost was, and then spent a lot of my other time on these other little things. Finally, it dawned on me is that I was going to miss something if I didn't put together a list. And so eventually what I did is I went ahead and put a list together of all the things that I take for granted, or I think about taking for granted here, that I'd miss if I was out there. Simple things like getting my oil changed. There's 30 Jiffy Lubes in the area, or competitors with Jiffy Lube. So these quick stop oil change places are a dime a dozen. I've got four neighborhood places for, working on your car. I've got a whole bunch of places to get my hair cut, things like that, stuff that you just kind of take for granted. I've got a Chipotle, a Five Guys, a chicken fillet, a couple of Chinese restaurants, on and on and on within 10 miles of where I live. So finding some place where I want to go out and eat and have a nice meal is no big deal, and I can choose from hundreds of places. So these are some of the things that you've got to create a list. And I came up with a list of probably about 40 items. And those 40 items were things that I thought, I've got to figure out what am I going to do about these 40 items when we're there. And sometimes it's going to be, well, I'm going to have to do without, or I'm going to have to figure out a way to deal with it on my own. So a perfect example is that there's one grocery store in the valley. I guess one and a half, but there's one major grocery store, and they're not very good. On a scale of 1 to 5, I'd give them a 2. We have never had a loaf of bread or a piece of bread there that we bought from their deli area, where you go into the boxes and you take one out and put it in your bag and go up and pay for it, that wasn't stale. And we like bread. We're used to getting fresh bread. It's something I like a lot. Luckily, there's a nice bagel place in the valley, because I like bagels too. So that's not a problem. But just recently, I've started messing around with baking bread so that we could bake our own bread. So that's a way, or one of the things you've got to put on the table of how am I going to get around that. We plan on having a garden. Plan on having several greenhouses. Another way to get around that the produce there is very average. There is a farmer's market every week, and we might end up selling at the farmer's market depending on how much our greenhouses produce. But we'll see. We're going to play all that by ear. So that's one of the things you need to do. The second thing you need to do is visit there a lot and get to know the place. And some of those articles I recommended that you go research and everything, 2 or 3 of them are going to recommend that you actually rent there for a year just to get to know the place, to make sure it's really where you want to retire. Because a lot of people, including myself, you don't have the money to go, oh, I'm going to go retire and get all set up, and then 3 years later saying, I hate it, I want to move again. Most of us are going to be like, well, I don't have the budget to move again. So you really want to make sure it's where you want to be. We actually traveled out there, I believe, over a 18-month period. Well, maybe it was more like 2 years. Probably about 12 to 15 times. So we really traveled out there a lot. I also am a researchaholic. You'll find that out as if you follow along on the channel. But I also researched everything I could. Local newspapers, blogs and vlogs of people who lived in the area, people who just visited the area, or may have been visiting friends, and their impressions of things that are going on in the town. Tried to go out at different times of the year. So I've been out there in the dead of winter, February, early spring, April, May time frame. I think it was late April, early May. I went out there one time. We've been out there during the summer 4 or 5 times. I've been out there in the fall 2 or 3 times, at least. And then there's a few sprinkled times I've been out there, I'm sure, that I'm just forgetting. For one reason or another, I went out there for something. And design, you've got to design your trips as not vacations. I often would talk to my wife about, we're going for a vacation where we're going to go have fun, 85% of the time. Or it's a working vacation. We're not going to do much besides try and take that punch list of 40 things that we're so used to and try and go through and figure out how are we going to deal with these. Is there a one-to-one replacement already there, or is there something we're going to have to kind of deal with? For instance, where do you buy a car? Where are you going to, how far away is it to drop it off for warranty work if it's a new car? That's just one of the punch list items to consider. So what I want to talk about is our first major trip out there. I'm not going to talk about all of the trips because, again, as I mentioned earlier, it's kind of like this tree of information. I hit one little node and there's 7 nodes of interesting things that came off of that. So our first trip, we wanted to kind of like get an idea of the state because neither one of us ever been to the state. Well, maybe we were once when we were there on vacation and we went over the mountain for something. But most of the time we spent it in Wyoming. So we wanted to get a feel of the state. So we decided to fly into Boise, Idaho. And we went to Boise. We drove around the city a little bit. Not a lot. I mean, it was like a 15 or 20 minute joyride around the city. Stopped and had lunch, and then we kind of got on the road. Now, if I remember correctly, the drive from Boise all the way to Idaho Falls, which is where we were going to go, was about 5 hours. And I think we took like 7.5 hours on our drive. And the primary reason it took so long is we stopped a lot on the way just to take a look at stuff, get out of the car, stretch our legs, talk about what we've been seeing. I kind of have a lead foot. My father was stationed in Germany for a year or so. Usually I drive through that stuff really fast. We went slow. Matter of fact, I pulled over a whole bunch of times to let traffic go by because we were way under the speed limit, just taking in the scenery. So I think that's an important kind of check mark off of our list we wanted to do. Secondly, the closest 2 cities to us were Idaho Falls, and now I'm drawing a blank. I'll remember it eventually. But that also had a Costco in it. So we just wanted to go by and look at the Costco in the second major city in the area. We just had lunch there and drove through it. A nice little quaint place. I drive through it all the time. That's another video. And then we went ahead and finally got to Idaho Falls. We actually stayed in Idaho Falls for 3 days. And we did that because we wanted to get to know the city. I went by and looked at the 3 or 4 ranked golf courses in the area. Even though it's about an 1.5-hour drive, it's still viable to come go golfing there. Also, talking to them, they said that their courses stay open another month to a month and a half longer in the fall and probably open another month earlier in the spring because they're several thousand feet lower than Teton Valley. So from there, we ended up then going to Teton Valley, stayed downtown in a quaint little hotel. I really like the hotel. Most people are going to see it online when they go look and say, you stayed there. It's owned by a husband and wife team that are just the nicest people you'd ever want. That you ask them for anything and they do it for you. The rooms are super clean. And it's kind of one of these things they inherited from their parents where they kind of like built little houses on top of each other almost. And so it's a mishmash of these old eclectic houses. Reminds me of the property in Bath, New York, actually. Very quaint, inexpensive, right downtown. We could walk every place we wanted to go. downtown. So we stayed there for, I think, 3 or 4 days. Then from there, oh, and that was one of our big checklists there, was one to get kind of, we've been looking at the valley online and kind of like marrying up what we were seeing online with things in person, like where were the streets that had the good view of the Teton mountain range and things like that. We also interviewed 3 different real estate agents, and that's like I said, this thing snowballs out into 1,800 different little pieces of information. There's another video. So we did that. We got shown some houses. We looked at the 3 areas. Victor, which has a nice golf resort in it. Driggs has a nice golf resort in it. It's beyond nice. It's super, super nice and super, super expensive. Kind of like trying to create the next place for the rich and famous to start buying property if they choose not to buy in Jackson Hole. And so we looked at Victor, we looked at Driggs, and then Tetonia is the 3rd place to the north. So we looked at a whole bunch of places in there, just trying to get a feel of both land and houses, because we went and looked at both. Even though we were kind of leaning 85% land and building and 15% buying, we still wanted to make sure we weren't being silly and not looking at some of these places. From there, like I said, then we decided to drive down to Denver and leave from Denver for a couple of reasons. One, we wanted to see what the drive was like going that direction. And secondly, there was a log cabin show, a builder's show, and we had planned to go to that to see and meet any local log cabin and timber frame builders, because at first we were going to build a log cabin. Again, another video. This all spreads out into a million different things. And then from there we flew home. So that was our first major trip out there to try and start check-marking things off the list and seeing where things stood. And there were a whole bunch more trips, and all of those were interesting in their own right. And I probably won't talk about specific trips, but I will be talking a lot about the specific things we did on each trip, because I think it's important to go through that checklist that we did, especially when we talk about all the research on what you should do if you're going to buy property versus buying a house. Things you've got to be consider about when you're in a rural area, fire regulations, fire department things. Are they going to allow you to build on the property? Can you get a build permit? All sorts of things like that. So like I said, there's this first bit of trip created 1,000 things to do, 1,000 things to talk about. So I think I'm going to leave it there, where again, comment below if there's other stuff you want me to cover, and I'll do that sooner than later. Otherwise, I'll just start picking things I feel like are interesting and the next thing that would be important to talk about. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to follow our journey, please subscribe and click the bell, and it'll notify you when we have a new video going up. Thank you very much, and hope to see you on the next video.